And good morning, everybody. Congratulations. You made it through the week. Another week of food safety, food quality, amazing products that every one of us enjoys every day. And if nobody says it, because quality goes unnoticed, Cara and I want you to know that you did a really good job. So thanks. We really do appreciate it. So if you're new to the chat, welcome. Pull up a chair. We're going to spend an hour talking about all things food safety. My name, Bryan Armentrout, and I am with the Food Leadership Group. And every week I bring an amazing expert on to talk with me about a specific topic. And then this week, if you're anybody who's been on this chat more than one time, you're going to recognize our next guest, which is Cara Mikkelson, Director of Food Safety with ChemStation. Cara, how you doing this Friday?
Good morning. Thank you. And I love being on this chat. This has been so much. I was just noticing, what is it, 178? Holy cow.
Yes,
congratulations to you. That is
Thank you. Yeah,
amazing.
we've been doing this now like 3.5 years.
That is, wow. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's really nice, right? And I think it's one of the driving factors in what we do. Being able to share our knowledge and help improve food safety for everybody. And last week I was at the Food Safety Summit in Chicago with Trace Gaines, and I met a ton of people, did some interviews. I'm going to be putting those up on my website, probably posting some on LinkedIn once I get them edited and all those type of things. But just asking people about food safety and what it means to them, and it was a blast. And sometimes when you're doing things like this, you're just sitting in your office or your dining room, looking at a camera, and you're not really sure if you're helping people or not. But I had more than a few people come up to me and talk with me about the chat and everything that we do here. So that's really nice knowing that we're out there, Cara, making a difference. So thanks to everybody, and thanks for investing the time to sit down with us and think about food safety. Just like Tim, who going out of the chat had a heck of a time. We were following his travails on LinkedIn as he was trying to get home. It seems like there was weather on both sides of the conference, so people were either get caught going in or got caught leaving. So it's the Midwest in the spring, I guess, right?
Absolutely. You never know. It could be 80, could be 8 inches of snow.
It's like here in Colorado. Which brings us to, as Tim already knows, where are you at in the world? So I am in Loveland, Colorado, where it's going to be a beautiful day today. 80 degrees, 83 degrees, I think it said today.
Really?
Speaking of the 80s, yeah.
Oh, wow. And I'm in Waukesha, Wisconsin, which is just outside of Milwaukee. And I think it's in the 70s today. So it looks really beautiful out. And but oh man, allergies are kicking in. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I need to take my little Claritin this morning too. So thank you for the reminder. So with that, let's first, right, I want to get into our topic here right away, but everybody join Cara and I for a drink of your favorite beverage. Cheers.
Cheers.
I got a new coffee flavor. It's El Salvador coffee. I'm going to get more of that. That one's really good.
Sounds really good.
So you are an expert in sanitation and food safety. And recently you had a presentation, right, relative to that topic?
Yep. Yes. So back in, I think it was March or April, I did a presentation. Well, first of all, back in January, I attended, and I do want to give a little plug for this, but I attended a workshop at IPPE that was put on by the Meat Institute and also the Commercial Food Sanitation. And it was on sanitary design and talking about the sanitary design principles that are published through the Meat Institute. And they've been around, and we can talk a little bit about their origin and what they are, but and then I pulled that together, kind of simplified it, tried to make it, kind of boil it down, and presented it at the Midwest Food Processors Association Sanitation Seminar. And I think it's just such an important topic, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Design. So.
And so a couple of really important things I think that you just said there, Cara, which is number one is the different principles. And so immediately mine went to the HACCP principles, right? These are tools. And it's always very helpful to think of these things in terms of different characteristics and different things that you can break down. And part of this as well is sanitation, right? As we talked about here on the chat before, one of the unsung heroes. We talk about quality not being noticed unless something goes wrong. Exactly the same with sanitation. And a lot of times those poor guys and gals who are working Sanitation are on third shift. It's the middle of the night. They're spending their whole work shift on their knees, scrubbing things and taking things apart. By the time they get done at the end of the workday, they're tired and they're wet and they're tired and they just want to go home. And then sometimes if you're the sanitation manager, no, you don't get to go home. You have to hang around for the morning staff meeting. And now you got to sit there and report on everything for the night. And if there was problems, and the quality manager, right, we're calling that poor sanitation manager. I always felt so bad, Cara. Like, oh God, I've got to wake Dave up. Do I really want to wake Dave up? Oh, damn it, I got to wake Dave up.
I think one of the things that we see constantly is production makes money, right? And in the eyes of the corporation, sanitation doesn't. And so you get squeezed for time, right? Time is of the essence, and we'll squeeze from, we have 6 hours for sanitation down to 4, down to 2. It's like, and trying to do more with less, right?
And they always squeeze at the wrong time. They want more production time when they're busiest. That's when you need to clean more, not less. Exactly. And that squeeze can really put a company at risk. Dr. DeFeo, who's with the Bryan Institute, who's been on the chat here a couple of times, amazing person, has a saying for that. He says, it's always funny that they say quality costs money. I get my quotes here. But they never say that about counting. They never say that about finance.
No.
They cost money, right? Well, yeah, but they're essential. Well, guess what? So are we. And if a recall happens, senior management figures out really, really quick just how important quality and sanitation are. We're there for a reason. Dr. DeFeo had another one that just popped in my mind. He said, okay, if you believe that quality costs money, tell you what, send them home for a week and see what happens.
Right. Yeah. See what happens. I guarantee nothing good will happen if you do that.
Absolutely. So good morning to Austin and Stephanie in Germany. There was an individual at the conference who came up and said hello, and I'm sure he's got a story for you, Stephanie, that may not got to you yet. So we'll see if that happens. So with that presentation, it was a really, really fantastic presentation, and we were preparing for this chat, Cara. We went through it, and I'm like, wow, this is the topic. This is great, right? Sanitation and these type of elements are something that we need to focus on more because it's a tool. And that's how we think about things in quality and food safety. These are tools that we use. And this is a really important one. And we need to look at sanitation, sanitary design with our different processes and our different equipment in our plant as the tools. If we've got crappy tools, things aren't going to go really well. So we're going to dive into this topic. And one of the things that we always do here on the chat at the beginning is kind of set that baseline. So let's kind of start off with your definition then, Cara, around sanitary design. What is sanitary design?
Yep. And so it's a set of standards, right, and procedures that have to do with the design of the equipment in the facility. And I'm going to pull up my cheat sheet a little bit here. Design is a set of standards and conditions related to food hygiene. So trying to, it considers all the structural designs of the equipment and to make sure that you're taking care of or understanding reduce the potential. And this is where I think this is really important, reduce the potential of cross-contamination or cross-contact. And I see this all the time, and not to get sidetracked here, but definitions count, right? They matter. And so the microbiological is cross-contamination, allergen, cross-contact. So you're trying to reduce that potential with the design of the equipment or the proper design. And it's just like we talked about. Again, it is a tool. These principles are a tool, but it's just like we talked about with reducing the time of the sanitation event. If you can make it easier, then that time becomes easier to do that sanitation within, right? So if you have, like you say, if you have the proper tools, we can achieve that, reduce that time of sanitation. But if and we'll get into sanitary design, but if you have to take everything apart and remove 1,000 screws in order to get to something to clean it, that's going to be an hour of your 2-hour time slot. And then you have to put it back together and put it back together right. So, which can be a challenge sometimes.
And yeah, and this is one of the things that we'll talk about as well, is that training piece is critical, and getting that on the floor training, because one of the challenges in sanitation, I don't want to go too far off topic here, but around the procedures and processes like you're talking about, is what I found, Cara, and I'm kind of curious as we dive into these, is I found that writing super detailed work instructions on, let's say, how to clean a filling machine weren't really helpful, because you'd have, gosh, in some of these, Cara, were 50-page documents. And they were pretty much obsolete the minute we wrote them, because the equipment's constantly changing. The maintenance guys are changing it. They're making it more efficient. They put in new parts or things like this. And the sanitation guys have to keep up on all of those type of things. So what we did is we changed that approach, and we changed it to more of a modular approach, because machines are made of different things that perform functions. So you have heater heads that seal the bags, and you have belts, and you have motors, and you have pipes, and you have valves, and those machines, it's a filler, but that filler is the combination of all those different little things. And so we broke it down into, here's how you clean valves, here's how you clean heater heads, here's how you clean the outside of the piece of equipment, so that in the minds of our sanitation crew, they had a recipe list of different things that they could go to, and then the machine didn't matter. And if something changed on that list, it's like, okay, well, we're going to put in new heater heads. Okay, great. Then we'll update that heater head sanitation process, and not the entire thing.
That's really smart. That sounds really, and not to get, again, we're getting off topic, but not to get off topic, but that is super smart, because heater heads are probably not only for this machine, but this, several machines. And then that way you don't have an SOP for a machine that every time you change a heater head element or whatever, you're going to have to change all of it for all of them. So that's really a smart way. I like that.
Indirectly, we're talking about one of our topics of the 10 checklist is compatibility. So we're teasing that one a little bit.
Yeah.
So with that, the American Meat Institute really created a really good guide on this, and I wanted to kind of give a little context around that. How did that come about, Cara?
Yeah, so it was actually really interesting. A task force was formed with several different companies, and at the time, and it was because there were several recalls going on, and it was focused in the meat industry initially, and the task force was formed by the American Meat Institute, which is now the Meat Institute, and this task force was formed to develop, okay, we need to do these, kind of figure out how does sanitary design play into the role of sanitation and just overall efficiency of sanitation. Because it had been thought about, certainly we had thought about it, but never kind of standardized, right? There was never really kind of guides to these type of expectations in the equipment and infrastructure of a facility. So it was kind of an interesting, but it came out of kind of recalls that were going around in the late 1990s in the meat industry. And I happened to be at that time at Oscar Mayer and was part of one of those recall incidences. Yeah, it was crazy. It was, and it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of time in the lab and a lot of samples. I was in the lab, so it was we did 1,500 environmental samples in 1 week. So it was, and that was back, and I always laugh because, now that's not as daunting because the technology has caught up a little, but we were using kind of rudimentary technology because PCR hadn't become very automated at that point. So it was a little bit of a challenge. Slept in the lab a lot, but it was a lot. It was a great, I wouldn't take it back. It was a great learning experience, but that's how this task force came to fruition.
And that's why I think you're so effective at what you do, Cara, is you look at the positive side of it and say, well, yeah, these things happened, but a lot of good work came out of it. So that's an important tip, right? It's a subtle thing, because in what we do, the failures are opportunities, and you have a big recall or you have a big failure in your plant. Our job as food safety professionals in this field is to help the company prevent that from happening again. And you can really increase your step change and your knowledge around those. Now, part of what we're trying to do here on the chat is help people avoid the pain of that first part and say, okay, here's the
Exactly.
things that you need to do to avoid that.
Yeah.
And so with that, with the AMI, and so I guess just the Meat Institute now, they came up with these 10 principles. So we're gonna dive into those. And so we got a ton to cover here. So
Yeah.
the first one on the list, compatible materials. So what does that mean?
So basically just made of materials that that are robust, right?
Mhm.
And that aren't going to break down. But also you can get, if you make, or sometimes people will weld with different types of metals, and then that can lead to corrosion, or it can lead to staining and things like that. And people don't often think about that as being a problem in cross-contamination or allergen cross-contact, but those types of rough surfaces can now lead to buildup, right, and things like that. So making sure that it's compatible, but not only that, but then compatible with sanitation chemicals too, and making sure that you're ensuring that the chemistry is appropriate, because we've seen that too, right, where it's not, and you can get some pitting and staining and things like that.
Definitely. Well, and so part of this to think about as well is, as we're going through these different principles, guys, think about this in terms of equipment I have and equipment we're thinking about buying. Both of these principles apply. And to Cortland's point,
100%.
passivation,
Yeah.
super important in equipment. And so passivation is the process of chemically treating it with acids and things of this nature to prepare that surface for food manufacturing. That's probably about the best.
Yep. That's the best way to say it. That's an awesome definition.
And so with that compatible material, so part of this, and think about this as well, and with Alan Saylor, who's an expert with 3A, as we talked about on the chat here before, where's that equipment coming from? So it doesn't new or old. The standards for equipment manufacture are very different around the world. There's lots of fantastic European equipment that works great over there and doesn't really cause a whole lot of problems, but will not be allowed in the US. So to your point, Cara, on the compatible material, if you have a piece of equipment that is okay, it's mostly stainless. And so first question is, what type of stainless? What's the series? What's the grade? How's that going to marry up with my equipment? But also other metals, which are used in other areas in other countries that are completely incompatible. Aluminum or things of this nature, where the chemicals that we use for food processing here in the US, because we have these sophisticated clean in place programs, we rely a lot on the sanitation principles, right? Time, temperature, flow, these type of activities. And we need that high volume, high temperature stream going into that tank to make sure that we get everything out of it. Those take a toll. And sometime, if you haven't done this, look this up on the internet, pitting on stainless steel. And because you think, oh no, stainless steel, this is fine. And then you look at it under a microscope. Oh, right, you see the little bacteria hanging out.
Yeah. There's actually a picture from, and she has since retired, but Dr. Amy Wong from the Food Research Institute, that came out probably in the 1990s, where she did a 3D picture of stainless steel scratch with Listeria monocytogenes in the scratches, and I think that's such a great picture for demonstration of exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, I think I've seen that. And that's how biofilms get formed. And now they hang out in there and they create a nice little cocoon, and good luck.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Those materials of that machine are incredibly important. A lot of times, so when I did work with SQF and I was on their technical advisory council, there's this, if you are reading through the standard, it'll say things like, if the machine is paintable, it must be, and people are like, oh my God, what are they? It's like, the standard is written for the world.
Right.
So there are areas where it's extremely humid, extremely hot, and they have to paint those machines to keep them from rusting.
Right. Yep. And I know that's a big auditor no, right? To have chipped paint of the, and a lot of times pumps are painted, and it is what it is. You have to decide though, okay, and again, this is part of the checklist, and one of them is about painted material or painted equipment, and how do you maintain, if you're going to have that, how do you maintain it so it maintains sanitary design?
Absolutely. Yep. So yeah, Duncan has a good point here. Good afternoon, Duncan. The quality of the welds. Oh, yeah. Welding skill varies greatly. And in plants, if you have a larger plant with a decent sized maintenance crew, there's some guys who are superstar welders, other guys who are just like everything else. You got your middle of the pack welders, and you got your guys who absolutely stink. Okay, fine. The guys who are really good at welding and have a nice even bead, and there's no areas where those bacteria can hang out. Those are the guys that you want working on your food contact equipment. The not so good welders, okay, fine, go out in the parking lot and work on that parking structure or something. You don't want those guys. You don't want them anywhere near your food products. Keep those guys out of there. So take a look at those welds and that compatibility. And so part of that compatible piece of it then too, Cara, is matching stuff up. And so you bring in this new piece of equipment. What's it made of, and what is it sitting next to in line, and what's it made of?
Exactly. And how are you going to be able to clean that?
Yep. Oh yeah. So Duncan's on a roll here.
Yep.
Hard water. If you so Wisconsin, very hard water in Wisconsin. That incredibly hurts the ability of your chemicals to work, and so that's why you need a good chemical advisor on your on your Rolodex on your phone to let you know about these things, because you may need chelating agents or other things that you add in with your chemicals to grab onto that stuff so it doesn't mess with the efficacy of your chemicals. Because as you know very well, Cara, and I'm sure you fight this all the time, is more is not better.
No, the glug method doesn't work. It's not a good method to have.
and I see here we have a distinguished guest in our chat here as well. So PV, welcome, retired professor emeritus. So anybody who's in Wisconsin knows who this guy is. So welcome. So here's a good tip on some more pictures of biofilms. And if you're putting together presentations as a quality manager, having those people learn a lot of times by seeing things. And so showing them pictures of these bacteria, really critical. Number two is
we're at number two.
Number two. Yeah. Number two is accessibility for inspection, maintenance, and sanitation.
And we were just talking about that just previously. If you have to take apart 5 million screws and then try to put that back together to get to the point where there might be hang up or things like that, that's not going to happen. If you can make it easy, easily accessible for inspection, and also to perform the activity, that's just going to increase your chances of having a piece of clean equipment after sanitation.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, I know as well as you that if we were to walk out onto a facility floor, we would see pieces of equipment that are going to have several screws and things like that. Then you have to decide, okay, how am I going to deal with that? And that's what this checklist kind of does. It kind of just alerts you to, okay, these are the pieces that we may need to concentrate on and potentially replace or figure out a different method to be able to pull apart to inspect. But at least you identify it, right? And you're able to keep it in your sights.
And so on that example, there's two ones that kind of popped to mind for me is, number one, you need to see these things before it goes in your plant and bring it up, because when a plant is looking at buying new equipment, it's generally the engineering group that's leading the charge on engineering and maintenance. And they're looking at it from a completely different viewpoint than we are in food safety. They're saying, okay, what's the line run speed? What's the flow rate? They're looking at it from an operational standpoint. So you need to look at it from a food safety sanitation standpoint. Take that panel off the bottom of the machine and start doing
get
this.
Your flashlight. Get your flashlight out. Get your headlamp. Get in there.
And so the people who are designing the equipment are engineers too, and they're thinking of it the same way. So open that up. And so I'm thinking of a particular piece of equipment that I saw in my past, which was a cooling tunnel for product. And so the belt would go through this little cooling tunnel to cool the product down before packaging. Makes it nice and easy to cut. And so this is a piece of equipment that was already bought. And when you open it up and look inside, the cooling system, so it was a glycol cooling system. So you had your radiated system in there with your fins and your fan that would blow the air up, the cool air to cool the product. How do you clean that?
Yeah. I'm not sure, right?
Right. And so
Delicately.
those are the type of things you need to identify before you buy the equipment and say, no, this is an uncleanable piece of equipment. So now we have this cooling system inside the machine, which cannot be removed. I cannot get inside. We have the perfect environment for growing Listeria. And now we're blowing air through that onto product. What? Unacceptable, right? So being able to find those deal killers and stop spending the money, because if you wait until after,
right?
if you wait until it's in your plant, you're married to it now. It's not going anywhere. So now you have to spend probably as much as you spend on the piece of equipment trying to retrofit it to make it cleanable. Or, the accessibility piece of it, as we're talking about here as well. There's just enough footprint in the corner of that back room to put this new piece of equipment, and they jam it in there and they go, ha ha, look at us, aren't we good? And the maintenance guys are looking at it saying, I can't get behind this. And now you're pardon the pun, hosed, right? You can't get the hoses to it.
Absolutely. And that's exactly it. You have to, if it fits, it's not always, if it's not accessible, then it's not going to be worth it. It's going to cause you more trouble than it's worth.
Well, as Tim says here, right, he's getting the point on this. This is a team. So if the plant is thinking about buying new equipment, you as a food safety quality manager or sanitation manager, you need to be sticking your nose in there and saying, okay, what are you guys doing? Right?
Yeah.
If you're on the management team of the plant, there's a CapEx list, and the plant has to budget out, because 9 times out of 10, this equipment's expensive that they're thinking about buying. 100%. You need to be on that committee and saying, okay, let's look at all these type of things. And you need to be in there and voice what we're talking about here today, because if you don't, you're going to be stuck with it.
Yeah, no. And I had a friend that kiboshed an entire project because they bought the equipment. He said, it's not cleanable. It absolutely was not cleanable. And they had to start all over again. And it was millions of dollars. So involved, just like Tim said, it's cross-functional. It's just like your HACCP team, just like your food safety team. It shouldn't just be, the engineers, or shouldn't just be food safety. It needs to be a cross-functional team.
Right. And that needs to be, so with any type of a purchase, there's different categories for what you're looking at. There's the must-have for the piece of equipment. There's the nice-to-have stuff. And then there's, hey, this is cool stuff.
Right.
If you've got a must-have, and what we're talking about here is must-have stuff, that needs to be on that list. So that if you come across something that is completely unacceptable, right, you can kill that thing right away. Part of this as well, we need to do this as an industry, because now we are also then teaching the equipment makers what we don't want. Because if we just keep buying equipment that's not cleanable, they're going to sell us equipment that's not cleanable.
It's not cleanable. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah. And that's where this task force was so important, starting in the 1990s, because it really has shifted the culture a little bit around those types of activities. So, design qualification. Exactly. Exactly.
So let's see. So the accessibility is super important. So number 3. The D, no products, liquid collection, or other material collection.
And I think this one is really important. And usually you see it's pretty good with a lot of things, but you'll see especially control boxes or things like that won't have the sloped, so you get the water kind of pooling in there. One example that I have that I just think, and you appreciate the ingenuity around this, but I was in a pizza manufacturing plant, and this was about 10 years ago, and they had a mixer that had the arm over it, and they would take totes of pizza sauce and dump it in. Well, the arm would collect the pizza sauce on top of there. And I was watching what was going to happen to that pizza sauce. And it's pizza sauce, so it's low pH, but there's still not good things that happen in pizza sauce. And sure enough, the pizza sauce pile just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then at the end of the day, what did they do? The last batch of the day, they scooped it all into the last batch. And I was like, oh, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, gee.
Yeah, and we see this on equipment where you'll have, like some like stainless steel paneling on the top of the machine that people put stuff on. Right? They'll throw stuff on there, and over time that metal gets beat down, and it's got a little bowl in the middle, and water collects in there, and it sits there and grows who knows what right over product, and nobody gives it a second thought. Equipment changes over time relative to these activities as well, with drainability and how those work. And part of it on the sanitation side is, you just take a hose and right. Well, now you're creating the aerosol, right? And stuff's flying everywhere. Where's that going? One of the things I always love to do when I go in plants is, I'm on the tall side. So I always will feel around on top of junction boxes and control panels for machines. Oh, do I find a lot of stuff up there?
Oh, I bet so.
Parts and tools and you name it.
And I'm on the shorter side, so I'm the same, but just down underneath.
Yep. So so great conversation here on the side, guys. Keep it up. So as we were talking about, aluminum. That if you're in a food plant and you have equipment on the food production area that's aluminum, right? That's one of the worst things that you can.
So hot. It's a chemical representative's kind of nightmare. There are products that can work, but you do have to be very delicate with it. So, and just understand the compatibility, right?
Yeah. And so part of this too, with what we're talking about here with liquid collection areas and stuff like this, don't just think about the top of the machine. Pull off those panels on the bottom of the machine and look inside. Where's it collecting inside? I had a recall in my past that came to that. There was a collection area inside a packaging machine that wasn't getting cleaned. And it was a very old piece of machinery. And that's always something to think about too, is the age of the machine, because design changes over time. We get better and better. Older machines, you're going back into the past. And that machine's probably cheap for a reason. And it wasn't designed to be cleaned inside. And once we figured that out, it became really, really obvious. And we in that case, we were lucky and we found the smoking gun. And so, we were fortunate in that situation. No one got sick or things like this. We caught it, but still, it was a very bad situation.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds like it. That sounds like it. But something that at least you caught, and then you can, and Tim mentioned in here, I think it was Tim, just saying that, now you can do that intensified clean. And I think one of the principles does talk about that, or the management of these. So.
Yeah, and definitely. So part of this, and this is very important too, as quality and food safety professionals, take a sanitation course. Learn how things are cleaned. Learn the principles of cleaning, time, temperature, flow, all the different things that are required. And as Neil Bogart has talked about on here before, and you see him talk about this as well, is you can't clean and sanitize something that's dirty. You have to get it clean first. And as a side conversation is going here too, what type of soil do you have? Is it protein? Is it fat? Is it carbohydrates? Are you using hot surfaces, cold? All these things come into play. And sanitation companies like ChemStation can help with that a ton to make sure that you're doing things correctly. So, man, we're getting some really good points going here, guys. Keep it up. This is awesome. Next one is number 4. Try different techniques here. Number 4.
Fade in and out.
Hollow areas are hermetically sealed. Immediately what comes to mind on this one, Cara, is rollers.
Hollow rollers. And I always think, because I remember when these principles were first coming into play in the early 2000s, and there were a lot of hollow rollers at that point. And I always think, okay, everybody, that has been mitigated within the food industry. And then you walk into a facility and it's like, nope. Like, whoops, missed that memo. So yeah, rollers are always a big one. And because those don't get cleaned, right? Nope. They never receive that sanitation process. And the thing is about that is you might get them clean during the sanitation, the outside, but stuff is inside, and as it turns and churns through the process, it starts to spit all that stuff out. And one of the things that kind of came up in the chat and everything like that, and we were talking about with buying equipment, and again, in my opinion, it's good to see the equipment run with food, right? And figure out where those hangups are, and figure out what the, where are the problem areas going to be? Because sometimes just looking at the piece of equipment is telling you one thing, but actually running it with food is going to tell you something different. So.
Oh, that's really smart. That's really smart. And if you can do that at the manufacturer, the equipment manufacturer's location, even better.
Right.
Evaluate
and that's not always available, and I know that, but it's also something to think about if you are investigating a harborage area. Sometimes, a lot of times you end up on sanitation investigating a harborage area, but sometimes it's worth that extra check to look for the harborage during production too.
Yeah. Well, so the golden rule, and this is something that's very, very true in quality sanitation. Your greatest leverage is before your company writes the check. You can get a lot of stuff done. Once a check is written, once a contract is signed, nope, good luck. Right? That's it, guys, moving on to the next sale. So if you're looking at this new piece of equipment, back to the hollow roller example, and you're like, ching, ching, hey, this roller's hollow. Can you guys switch this out to a solid roller? Because they make them out of, different like Teflon and different things that are solid. That sales guys go, absolutely. Yeah, we can get that done for you. No problem. Right. He wants the sale.
Right.
That's when you fix those things, is before you even take it.
Yep, exactly. And it's so important to do that inspection, right? If you are able, before it even gets to that point of writing the check. So.
Yep. And so, in our notes here, you had some fantastic examples of hollow areas. So we talked about the rollers, but you were also talking here about frames, bolts, studs, mounting plates, brackets, junction boxes, nameplates. Yes, nameplates.
Nameplates. Yeah.
They put their name on the machine on this little riveted on plate on the machine, and then there's what's behind that plate, growing behind that plate. End caps, sleeves, and other items must be continuously welded to the surfaces, not attached via drilled and tapped holes.
Yeah. And I've had several examples where hollow framework has been the smoking gun, right?
Yeah.
And it's another one where if you clean it during your normal sanitation process, your environmental monitoring swabs might come back okay. But once that starts shaking, you're shaking all that junk out of there during the process. And that's when you could start seeing those issues.
Absolutely. Yep. And so moving on, number
5.
No niches or niches, whatever you say.
Yeah, that's always your equipment should be free of those, and that's a tough one, right? Most equipment that I see has the opportunity for having a growth niche in it. So, and again, it's one where if you identify that, you have to manage it. Right. And maybe that's that more frequent cleaning, or more frequent, that intensified clean, that deep clean. So if you do have that and you have to deal with it, how are you going to deal with it?
Right. And so in that category as well. So number one, and we'll reemphasize this, as part of the equipment purchase committee, as part of the design control committee, as Cortland is talking about here, if the plant is looking at a used piece of equipment because it's a great deal, it's like, okay, well, why is it a great deal? Where was it? Was this in another facility that had allergens, for example? Talk with, if you can. Sometimes this is really, really hard because an equipment broker has the equipment, but sometimes, a plant will advertise on sites, say, hey, we're getting rid of equipment or whatever. And you can actually talk with the people who do what we do and find out if, what type of issues there were with that equipment. It can be kind of hard to do that, but if you can do it, man, that's gold.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and trade shows and things like that too are always a good, or trade organizations. There are a lot of good ways to be able to connect with people that have possibly used those pieces of equipment in the past, and maybe they have
Mhm.
that information and that knowledge. So always good, always
Yeah,
good.
and so I would think on that side as well, Cara, and Tim's talking about this too, is you may think you're getting a good deal on this piece of machinery, but it's got all these niches, it's got all these problem areas which need extra care and attention and hand cleaning. And so in the long run, if you're looking at your ROI, your return on investment, which in most justifications is 3 years, you may spend more in extra labor and chemicals trying to help that substandard piece of equipment along than you would be buying a higher quality, newer piece of equipment and saving all that extra labor.
Agreed. And water, right?
Yeah. Oh,
The electrical saving, all of it, right? The savings could be astronomical. You may make it up in no time. So
yeah. As Tim says, and this is a great phrase on this. Thank you, Tim. Price versus cost of ownership. And think about this in our personal lives. You may be thinking about buying that cute little Italian sports car that, when you look in consumer reports, doesn't have a very good quality rating.
right,
So how much am I going to be spending over the life of the vehicle in repairs, and what am I going to get for transportation when it's in the shop? It may be a better choice to get the reliable Toyota
right,
versus the super sexy Maserati, right?
right.
Um,
It may not be flashy, but it's functional.
and yeah, I'm a car guy, and so used Maseratis are very cheap. There's a
For
reason
a
used
reason.
Maseratis are very cheap. It's because you're going to pay the mechanic the difference over the course of your ownership before you finally get rid of it.
Uh,
So, sorry, Maserati, you're
yeah,
kind of down there.
interesting.
Um,
Yeah,
don't-
that's awesome.
yep, don't do that.
That's a
Um,
great analogy, though. So
and
we're on six. Oh no, now we
number
gotta go to
one
two
and
hands.
five, number six is operational performance. And normally, Car, this is the only thing that's on the list for other groups, is how, so the plant manager is looking at it from an operational standpoint, and that's why he runs the plant.
Right.
He or she wants to make that plant as efficient as possible. And generally, number one on their list is, okay, if I'm going to be shelling a lot of money for a new piece of equipment, I need to make sure that the return on investment is good, and that having this new piece of machinery is going to provide the justification I need to the financial group to make the purchase. Okay, boys, how fast does it run?
Right.
That's generally what they look at.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to, and that is important. I do understand we do need to run businesses, right? But if you think about the operational performance, if the operational performance isn't sanitary, doesn't allow for sanitary operations, then it could be down for an extended period of time for these deep cleans, additional
Yeah,
deep cleans, and things like that. It's not going to buy you any extra operational time. And
exactly.
especially if you end up in a recall situation, and of course, and I know that is down time, and
Yeah.
there is no getting that back. Not only that downtime, but the brand damage and everything that goes along with it. So you have to
Well,
be very careful.
no, it's a good point. And as well, let's say that you're looking at buying a brand new batch mixer, and you dump your ingredients in this thing, and it's got, as we were talking about before, it's got the big arm that's going around inside, and this is a brand new whiz bang. It mixes twice as fast as the old machines, and the plant manager is going, yes, I can improve my plant throughput by putting in this new mixer. Part of what we need to look at then, as part of the design review committee for the purchase, is, okay, great, I understand that it works twice as fast. Does that mean parts wear twice as fast? So one of the things we hate so Cara and I are back on dairy and beverage and stuff like this, is the mixing vats that have the Teflon scrapers, right? That go around the edge, and there's little cotter pins that hold those in. and those go missing. How do I know that? Yeah, I know that. Right? Everybody knows that. You always need to check those before you start up that they're there. Those Teflon scrapers wear. So how fast do those wear? And a lot of times, if you go into those meetings, and you ask these questions, you're going to get this. Right? Crickets, because they haven't really thought about this. So part of this is you need to present those alternate viewpoints around that operational performance. It's not all about the speed. Plus, don't forget, and this is something that we can remind them as well, is just because that one piece of machine is fast doesn't mean your entire line is now fast. The golden rule is every production line has a bottleneck. You can move it, but you're never going to eliminate it. So now that you've put in that fast mixer, now the filling machine
can't keep up. Yeah.
So now what? Now what happens? Well, oh shoot! Now we need a tank to hold the product while we're waiting for the filler.
I was just going to say, you could have the growth of microorganisms just sitting waiting. Right? If it's not kind of a jacketed mixer or something that's going to keep the temperature at appropriate temperature. So yeah, very good point.
Duncan liked the cricket noise.
Oh, yeah, I know. They're really good.
Maybe I'll play another one here later on toward the end. I'll find a good one here. So operational performance. And to your point, Cara, that's a very important one. So, okay, we need to introduce this new mixer. Now we've got this new tank. Oh, right. So now this is going to kick to the food safety team. We have changed the process. We need to be doing a food safety evaluation. To your point, what you just said, super important, is, okay, great. Now we've got this new equipment. How do we clean this new equipment? Do we have enough, to Cortland's point here, do we have enough water capacity? Is our boiler producing the right quality of water for the cleaning of this equipment? Do we have enough electrical? All these type of things for that operational performance. You just can't look at the spec sheet from that manufacturer to say, ooh, look at this. How cool is that? It has to be part of an integrated system within your plants, and these things all need to function together. So operational performance means the operational performance of the entire system, and what new risks, to your point, Cara, which is a really good one, what new hazards is this going to introduce into the process?
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah.
Moving along here. Number seven.
Maintenance
enclosures. So what do you mean by that?
And human interfaces, so the buttons, the valves. But the big one that I think a lot of times, and I've seen this, and you can tell me if you have too, but conduit. Because how often do you clean your conduit? Never. For a reason, right? And it tends to be over the line, or it tends to be near the line, and stuff builds up in there, and then you get that condensation or the dripping, and it can drip onto the line. Can always, just a great, again, that going back to those niches or harbors areas, conduit tends to be a big one that can lead to that.
So if you're in a plant, and let's say you're a guest and you're going around on a plant tour and the management team is with you, what I look for is I want to see the members of that management team at the plant doing this, right? You're looking around like this, and you're looking around at stuff, you're looking on the floor, you'll see that. But to your point, Cara, I want to see this too.
Yes. Yep. I always say, look up. And when I was just in a facility not that long ago, and I was looking up, and they're like, what are you looking for? And I like, stuff. That was, for me, it's just habit. I walk into a facility and I start with looking up and looking around and making sure I'm looking under and everything like that. So
and so a lot of times, it's pipes and things on the floor are dangerous. People trip on them and they're in the way, and it's not very sanitary. So, oh, cool. We'll route the lines up here along the ceiling 20 feet over our heads. Well, now nobody can get to them, and nobody can clean them, and nobody can change gaskets. And there's special hazards you need to take into account for those type of things. And so
compressed air, that could be a whole discussion in and of itself. I agree. And it oftentimes, and again, sometimes going into a facility, make mention of compressed air, where your compressed air is, how often are the filters changed, and like Tim is saying, go back to the compressor, and people are like, really? It's surprising, and then you come to find out they've never even considered it, and it's just something, again, that you and I, that's just in our brain after years of doing these types of things. So
right, so experience generally comes from painful events.
Exactly.
And so Francisco brings up a banger of a point here. So thank you, Francisco. Added risk of new equipment, R&D. So you may be changing the product. So in my example with that mixer that's going twice as fast as the old mixer, are you whipping up the product now? Are you making it fluffy in some way and changing the texture of the product?
Right.
R&Ds probably have to do some trials on that equipment to make sure it's not changing the product. Nice point, Francisco.
That's a very good point. Very, very good.
Good.
Again, going back to Tim, cross-functional team.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the more people who have different perspectives on this, the better. And so really, I mean, this is why we have such a smart audience here with the chat, Cara, is number 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is, I'm trying to come up with new ways. I'm going to run out here.
You can do 4 and 4.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. The next one is what we're talking about, right? And these guys are ahead of the curve. Compatibility with other plant systems. You just can't plug these things in. And so we're just not necessarily talking about the physical things like we're talking about here. So connections to air, connections to water, connections to sanitation, connections to electrical. Is it the right voltage, right? What if it's 110 and you're running 220 or these type of things?
Yeah.
Computer. All right, more and more important. Our systems are becoming more and more computerized. What type of system is it using? So I worked for French companies, and they would sometimes send over equipment from France, and we would install it in a plant. And the IT guys and the engineering groups would go in to program the equipment, and all of the programming was in French.
Oh.
What do you do now? Well, okay, well, now we got to bring some French-speaking engineers over to program the equipment. Okay, well, now you can get it going. How are you going to keep it going? What happens when it breaks down? And now you've got equipment from Europe. Now you also have to think about spare parts because you probably got to ship them in for that piece of equipment. And not to mention anything around standards, but a lot of times now what we see is software is a huge hang up for equipment.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Ensuring, and that's, again, this is where, our cross-functional team, including the IT, is always important. And I always say to include them in our, in our HACCP or food safety team. But again, your sanitary design team too is important to understand that.
Well, think about this now too, as well, I just thought of this now, and this is why these chats are so great, is a lot of our equipment now has Wi-Fi. It's like, oh, look at this new piece of equipment can talk directly to your iPad, laptop, and you can get data directly from it. Cool. What if somebody hacks that and shuts it down?
So important to understand. 100%. Yep, I agree. Or do you have Wi-Fi? A lot of times you go into the middle of a plant, you don't have any service, whether it's Wi-Fi, data, whatever. How is that going to run, or how are you able to make that run?
If you have a small cheese plant operating in rural Wisconsin,
you're out of luck.
Out of luck.
Yeah.
So Cortland's putting some good comments in here now, right? So CFR. So he's talking about part 11 here and all those type of things. Very good. So moving on to number 9. Cleanable to a microbiological level.
And this kind of ties everything, in my opinion, right? Like, this is the goal, right? You want to make sure that you're not having any of that. It must be constructed so that you are able to clean it, so that microorganisms are not left behind after your sanitation event. And that's ultimately everybody's goal, obviously, but sanitary design can play a huge part of that. And not having that design perfected to enable that. And again, leading all the way up to this, all the principles kind of play into this one.
Yeah, and so speaking strictly on the microbiological side of things, your product is also going to increase your sensitivity. So you are making ready-to-eat product, right? You're completely relying on the cleanability of that equipment to protect your product. Your intended use. Let's say you're making products for infants, small children. Those
So
products have to
important.
be really, really cleanable. You have to understand that. And you may need to do trials with that equipment to figure out if that's true or not.
Yep.
So, running the machine, having a surrogate sample, running it through and seeing what survives depending on the equipment. And you may need to work with a third-party lab or a consultant or somebody like Dr. Marshall at Eurofins to help you set that up so that you can make sure and that equipment is actually cleanable, and build that into the contract, that if it's not cleanable, you are not buying it.
Right. Exactly.
And which
And
really goes into number
just like
10.
Tim said there, number 9 is the Cliff Note version of the whole thing.
Yep, yep,
100%.
absolutely. So Cortland asked a question: is ATP swabbing adequate? And I would say no, it's not.
I would say
So,
not, yeah, and I guess this kind of bumps into number 10, right?
right.
Validated sanitation protocols. And again, this kind of sums up everything for this all of these principles. If your sanitation process is not validated, 10. We made it. Just barely under the wire. But if it's not validated, how do you know? And is ATP enough? I would say no in this circumstance, because you really should have a program of ATP plus that micro, if that's what you're targeting, or ATP plus the allergen of concern. So ensuring that your program is, especially for validation, robust, right? Verification might be a different aspect, but that validation, you need to ensure that you're comprehensive in your sample collection.
Yep. So ATP, allergen testing, these are verification activities to make sure that your equipment is working properly. And the validation piece, and we've talked about this before, Cara, and I wanted to make sure everybody recognizes this too, is validation of your equipment required?
It is not, per the FDA regulation for the preventive controls, it is not required. Is it a good idea? It is a good idea. It's an industry best practice, is what I would say.
So yeah, you buy that piece of equipment, your sanitation team comes in, works with a third party, ChemStation, whoever, relative to that. Okay, here's a new piece of equipment. Here's how you need to run it. Here's your time, your temperature, your cleaning cycle, your CIP programming. Here's the parts that need to be COP. Here's how long you need to run those. Here's then the validation process. If the cleaning doesn't work, here's how you go back with corrective actions and re-clean. And that all needs to be set up. And FDA is going to want to see that, because that's an important part of your preventive controls, is sanitation.
Yes. Yeah. And you have to own it, the company, right? You have to take charge, and you have to own that validation and really understand that validation. So.
Yeah. And to Cortland's point here, and this is a good one as well, is your, your method. Is it a validated method? Where did you get this method that you're using for this? Did it come from FDA BAM? Is it an ISO approved methodology? Who sanctioned this method that you're using? You need to understand that as well. So generally those are pretty well laid out, but you need to have a clear understanding of that.
Agreed.
Oh, that's a ton. So as we're kind of closing out here, Cara, what's some kind of your closing thoughts for everybody listening today?
Yeah, well, and what I want to do is just point you to this checklist that's available on the Meat Institute site, because there is an actual checklist that they put together, and then you can score it. And depending on how you score it, you can take those actions to ensure that you are having sanitary designed equipment in your facility. So it's a robust system, another tool in your toolbox, right, for our quality system.
And I will put that checklist in the locals group. I'll put the link here for everybody. So I'll get that link to that pamphlet from Cara. This presentation was also based on a presentation you did as well. So I didn't know if that was available for people to see or not.
Yep. It's available for sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. So
Yeah.
I'll put that in the locals group as well.
Perfect.
So with that, whoa, time absolutely
I know.
flew
I
today.
know.
And I think a big part of that is with our, the word audience isn't correct, right? With our participants in our chat here today, because you guys make this what it is. And the sharing of knowledge and information here, it's exactly what we want. It's exactly what we're going for. So everybody in the chat here, Duncan, Cortland, Tim, PV, all you guys, thank you for doing that. And so I promise another thing here.
Oh yeah.
Thank you. Applause for you. So with that, thank you, Cara. Your expertise
Of
is
course.
always highly valued, and love it when I have you on.
I appreciate being asked. I love being on this, and I look forward to it every Friday.
Oh, thank you. Yep. So with that, guys, thank you for investing the time. We know an hour is a lot of time to spend, so we appreciate you investing in food safety and helping to improve the food supply. So with that, we'll bring our chat to a close for this week. And of course, as Cara said, we'll be back here next week at the same time, Friday, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, and we live stream on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. So join us for the next food safety chat. In the meantime, enjoy your weekend. It's going to be a beautiful spring weekend. So get out, have some fun, and we'll do it all again next week. So thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.